I'm sitting in my favorite old armchair by the window, the one with the faded floral pattern and a cushion that remembers every ache in my back better than I do. A gray afternoon light filters through the lace curtains. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbles. Summer storm coming in slow. The kind that doesn't hurry but makes you wait and stew in your own thoughts. There's chamomile in my teacup. Not because I like it, I don't, but it calms the jitter in my chest that won't quite go away these days. My hands shake a little as I hold the cup. Not from age, though Lord knows age is creeping up like ivy on the side of an old house, but from something deeper, something heavier. The radio hums low in the background. Old country, soft static. I keep it on for company. Not that it talks back, but it makes the silence less accusing. Sometimes I think if I don't start talking now, I never will. And I need to. Not because I want sympathy, I'm not looking for redemption, but because I need someone to know the truth. Even if it's just you, a stranger listening on the other end. Maybe you'll understand. Maybe you'll hate me. Either way, just stay with me. And hey, if you find yourself here often, like I do, listening to stories while folding laundry or sitting with a warm mug in your hands, maybe you should hit that subscribe button. I know I would. Not because they told me to, but because some stories deserve to be heard. Even the ones we're scared to tell. Now, let's go back to the summer I turned 60. To the letter that arrived from a name I hadn't spoken in nearly 40 years. It came on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were when I visited the market for peaches. Not the grocery store kind, but the real ones. Fuzzy, misshapen, fragrant. The kind that smelled like childhood and stained your hands. I came home with a brown paper bag full of them, humming to myself, when I saw it sitting on the hallway table. A cream-colored envelope, thick, heavy. My name in a careful, old-fashioned script I recognized instantly, though I hadn't seen it in decades. Margaret Lynn Dalton. Nobody calls me that anymore. Not even my late husband did. But she did. Always full name, like it was a charm she could twist around her finger. Catherine. My sister. I didn't open it right away. I carried it around the house like it might bite me. I washed the peaches, wiped the counters, turned on the radio, turned it off. Finally, I sat in this very chair, the one I'm in now, and slid it open with the edge of a butter knife. Inside, just one sheet of thick paper. Her handwriting, still elegant, still maddeningly perfect. Maggie, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I'm dying. I don't want anything from you. No forgiveness, no visits. I just want to tell you the truth before I go. Please read the rest. Cat. I folded it up, stared at the garden outside. The storm was closer now, trees swaying, wind teasing the edges of the sky. I didn't cry. I didn't feel much of anything at first. Just that old hollow place inside me, shifting, like a door creaking open again. Catherine was everything I wasn't. She was beautiful. Not in a loud, obvious way, but in that soft, golden kind of way that made people lean in when she talked. Blonde curls, dancer's grace, big hazel eyes with just a pinch of mischief. She was our parents' miracle baby. I was the accident, the one they had too young, too poor, and too unready. She came 7 years after me when Dad had a better job, and Mom had figured out how to fake a smile for the neighbors. They poured every bit of love and energy into her like they were trying to erase their regrets. I didn't blame her for that. Not back then. She was my baby sister. I brushed her hair, taught her how to tie her shoes, held her hand when she cried after nightmares. I was more mother than sister, really, until she turned 16 and everything shifted. She got the lead in the school play. I worked the ticket booth. She got the family car on weekends. I took the bus to my night shifts at the diner. She got scholarships. I got married at 19 to a man I didn't love because I was pregnant and out of options. She got free. I got stuck. But I never hated her. I just wanted it once to be chosen first. The letter. It wasn't the only one. More arrived. One a week, every Tuesday, like clockwork. Each one told me a little more. Each one peeled back something I hadn't even known was still raw. In one, she told me about our father's will, how he'd left everything to her, claiming I'd never really needed much. How she'd found the second will, the one naming us both, and burned it. Because she was scared, because she wanted the house, because she thought I'd waste it. In another, she confessed about Mark. Mark, my first real love. My only real love, if I'm honest. We were 17. He was kind, gentle, with hands that trembled when he held mine. I thought we were forever. But he left for college, stopped writing, vanished. I thought he'd gotten bored, outgrown me. No. Turns out Catherine had found his letters and thrown them away. Had even written back to him once pretending to be me and told him I'd moved on, that I was pregnant by another boy, that he should forget me. She wrote it like a confession, like a prayer. I was jealous, she wrote. I had a love I never knew how to keep. I wanted to ruin it before it bloomed. I was 17 and stupid. I'm sorry. I clutched that letter so hard it tore in the middle. I sat in this chair for hours, listening to the rain pound the roof, the thunder screaming overhead, while I held those broken words in my lap. You might think I hated her then, that I screamed, tore the pages up, cursed her name, but I didn't. I just sat there and remembered the last time I saw her. It was at Mom's funeral, 23 years ago. Catherine wore black silk. I wore a department store dress I'd sewn a week before. We hugged at the graveside like strangers pretending. Then we never spoke again. She had a life in Chicago. Art gallery, a string of boyfriends, a condo by the lake, no children, no family from what I heard. She'd send Christmas cards for a while. Then those stopped too. And now, out of nowhere, she was writing, spilling every ghost between us. I couldn't tell if it was cruelty or mercy. The fourth letter changed everything. It wasn't just about the past. It was an invitation. She wrote, I've left something for you. A key. It's in the old music box at the lake house. I haven't been back in years. I want you to go. I want you to see what I couldn't say. I sat with that one for a long time. The lake house. That place was sacred once. Our grandparents' cottage. Summers of sunburn and mosquito bites and skinny dipping and blueberry pancakes. It was the one place we were sisters without the rest of the world watching. Then Dad died. The house sat empty. Catherine took it over in the will. I never went back. Until now. I packed a bag that night. Told no one. Drove 6 hours the next morning with nothing but the letters and the sound of my own pulse in my ears. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, the sky was clear. Birds sang. The lake glittered like it had when we were girls. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Dusty, tired. Like it, too, had been waiting a long time to speak. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, smelled wood, mothballs, and something sweet. Lilac, maybe, ghosting in the corners. The music box was still on the mantel. Silver, heart-shaped, slightly tarnished. I lifted the lid. Inside, a brass key and a note. For the attic. Be ready. I didn't open the box right away. I sat cross-legged on the attic floor, brushing off the thick dust that coated the lid. Something about it felt sacred, dangerous, like prying into a secret you once promised not to touch. My hand hesitated over the brittle masking tape. I could hear Helen's voice in my head, that exact lilting tone she used when she didn't want to be questioned. Just leave it be, Jeannie. Some things are better left where they belong. But Helen was gone. And maybe I was finally old enough, brave enough to know the truth. The tape peeled like old sunburn. Inside, I expected the usual: yellowed newspaper clippings, birthday cards, maybe a few Polaroids. What I found instead were dozens of letters, tied in neat bundles with pale blue ribbon, still holding the scent of her perfume. Evening in Paris. I'd know it anywhere. The first envelope I picked up was addressed not to her, but to me. Jeanette, if you're reading this, then I'm already gone, and that's probably the only reason you dared to open this. I froze. The attic dimmed. My lungs forgot how to breathe. She knew. Of course she knew. I never hated my sister, but I hated the way people looked at her, the way our parents treated her like spun gold, while I was denim. Helen was grace, elegance, a piano recital at 7, and a poetry prize by 10. She wore pearls to the grocery store and somehow never got mud on her shoes, even in the rain. And me? I broke my wrist falling off a hay bale and once got gum stuck in my hair during Bible study. She was summer linen and whispered compliments. I was hand-me-downs and scraped knees. And yet I loved her. I really did. Until I couldn't tell the difference between loving her and resenting her. The letters were dated from 1972 to 1979. Most were to a man I'd never heard of, Warren. Some were clearly never sent. And each one painted a version of Helen I had never known. She wasn't happy, not the way I thought she was. She wrote about loneliness, about expectations strangling her at every turn. She hated our mother's obsession with appearances. She despised the man she eventually married, not Warren, and admitted she cried herself to sleep most nights during her first year of marriage. I thought marrying him would get me out, but it just locked me in a prettier cage. My stomach turned. Had I envied a life that was never real to begin with? Later that evening, I sat on the living room rug with the letters spread around me like paper ghosts. The fireplace crackled as if it, too, were reacting to Helen's confessions. And then I found the photo. Tucked between 2 envelopes was a Polaroid of Helen, barefoot in a field, arms around a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, dark-haired, and looked at her like she was the only thing keeping the world from falling apart. On the back of the photo, in Helen's slanted cursive, Warren, the life I almost chose. I read until sunrise. The last letter was dated June 1979, a month before her wedding. Dear Warren, you told me to come with you, that we could leave everything behind and start over in Montana, that no one would care that I wasn't the girl they wanted me to be. But I couldn't do it. I was too afraid, too good at pretending. I hope someday you forgive me. Maybe in another life, we'll dance barefoot in the kitchen and wake up without makeup or lies. I held the letter to my chest and cried, not just for her, but for me. Because all this time, I thought she had the perfect life, and I had built my pain around a fiction. 3 days later, I found myself driving. I didn't tell my daughter where I was going. I just packed an overnight bag, fed the cat, and left. The road stretched out ahead of me like a second chance. The return address on one of the older envelopes was in Bozeman, Montana. I didn't know what I was hoping to find there. A bookstore? A gravestone? A man who still remembered her? All I knew was if I wanted to stop living under Helen's shadow, I had to see where the light had almost reached her. I arrived in Bozeman under a sky that looked like it couldn't make up its mind. Half sunshine, half storm cloud. The kind of sky that feels like a warning. Or maybe just a memory trying to form. I'd never been to Montana before. Never had a reason to. But now I had Helen's ghost in my glove compartment, a bundle of her letters wrapped in a silk scarf, and a name I couldn't stop whispering like a prayer. Warren. I started at the return address from the letter dated March 1975. It was a little yellow house with green shutters and a wind chime that sounded like church bells when the wind hit just right. I stood on the porch for 5 minutes before I knocked. Part of me hoped no one would answer, that the house would be empty and I could pretend this whole journey had been romantic nonsense. But the door creaked open. A man, older than I expected, but still unmistakably him, stared at me with cautious eyes. He had a scar on his chin and wore a soft denim shirt that looked like it had survived decades of stories. "Can I help you, man?" His voice, low, calm, like a river in late spring. "I think you once knew my sister. Her name was Helen Whitaker, in the 70s. Silence. Then something shifted in his face. A muscle behind the eye, a soft part of memory pushing through. "He did," he said. "God help me, I did." He invited me in. The house smelled like cedar and old coffee. His living room was a museum of Montana life. Photographs of horses, shelves lined with books about mountains and silence and wilderness. A painting of a storm over Flathead Lake hung above the fireplace. "I didn't know Helen had a sister," he said, pouring tea into mismatched mugs. "She didn't talk about me?" I asked, trying not to sound hurt. He hesitated. He did, but not often, and not kindly. I flinched. That part of me, the girl always standing behind Helen in every photo, shriveled for a moment. "She said you were our mother's favorite," he added softly, "that you never had to pretend." I let out a bitter laugh. "She thought I was the favorite?" He nodded. Funny how sisters see each other. We sat in his kitchen for hours. He told me about the summer of 1972 when Helen came to Bozeman for a photography retreat. She wasn't supposed to stay more than a week. She stayed 6. She was electric. Everywhere she went, people turned their heads. But when she laughed, really laughed, it was like lightning. Like you were standing in the middle of something too beautiful to survive. I believed him. They danced in dive bars, slept in the bed of his truck under stars. He taught her how to fly fish. She taught him how to quote poetry without sounding foolish. She told me she wanted to run away. We almost did. "Why didn't you?" I asked. He looked out the window. "Your mother sent a telegram. said your father was sick, said she needed to come home immediately or not bother coming back at all. She always knew how to guilt us into obedience. She left in the middle of the night. No goodbye, just a note on my windshield that said, "I love you, but I'm not brave enough." I showed him the letters. He read them slowly, holding each one like it might crumble. His hands shook. She kept these, all these years. "I thought she had the perfect life," I whispered. "Husband, house, money. But she was miserable. She wore her life like a costume. She didn't marry for love. She married for escape." We sat in silence. Then, without warning, he stood up, disappeared down the hallway, and came back holding a small wooden box. He said, "I wrote to her too, after she left. Every year. Birthdays, anniversaries. I never got a reply, but I kept writing." He opened the box and handed me a letter postmarked 1986. "Helen, do you remember the blue dress you wore on the fourth night? Do you remember the thunderstorm we watched from the barn? I do. Every damn detail. I still keep a light on, just in case you ever decide to come home." That night I stayed in a motel down the road, my thoughts louder than the air conditioner. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring at me. All these years, I'd been chasing Helen's life like it was a prize she stole from me. But it wasn't a prize. It was a prison with prettier curtains. And my own life, my quiet, modest, unglamorous life, suddenly felt like a freedom I had failed to appreciate. The next morning, Warren met me for coffee. "I always wondered what would have happened if she stayed," he said. "She'd probably still be miserable," I offered. "Maybe. Or maybe we'd be sitting on a porch somewhere watching grandkids run through sprinklers." He looked at me kindly. "Thank you for bringing her back to me, even just for a little while." I gave him one of the letters, the one where she said she still dreamed of Montana. He held it like it was holy. "I think it's time you forgave yourself," I told him. He looked away, blinking fast. "I've tried, but I think I was waiting for someone to say that out loud." On the drive home, I played Helen's favorite music, Patsy Cline and Billie Holiday, and watched the landscape blur into memory. I didn't know what I would tell my daughter when I got back. I didn't know if this journey had changed anything on paper. But something in me had shifted. The resentment I carried like a second spine had begun to dissolve. Because the truth is, I never wanted Helen's life. I just wanted to believe I hadn't wasted mine.
I remember the sound of the spoon clinking in my teacup that morning. I stirred it longer than necessary, watching the whirlpool of cream spin itself into silence. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked at nothing, and the mail truck wheezed down the street like it did every Tuesday at 10:14 a.m. Everything felt normal, and that made it worse. After I left Joni's, something shifted. Not just in her, but in me too. There's something about telling a lie and watching someone swallow it whole that makes you feel sick. I didn't lie exactly, I just didn't tell her the whole truth. I let her believe things were worse than they were. I needed her to worry about me, to care. I needed to feel needed. I told myself I deserved it. After all these years of being her shadow, wasn't I entitled to a little spotlight? But what I didn't expect was how quickly that spotlight would burn. I was back home when I found the envelope. It was wedged between the cushions of the armchair, my old recliner that still creaked every time I leaned back. The envelope was yellowed, brittle. sealed with a name in blue ink. To Diane. From Mom. My breath caught. I hadn't seen her handwriting in nearly 30 years. The letter must have slipped out of the photo albums I'd taken back from Joni's. My hands trembled as I opened it, the paper smelling faintly of lavender and old cardboard. My mother's words spilled across the page like she'd written them yesterday. She talked about Joni, about how proud she was of her music, her career, her husband. Then, halfway through the page, she mentioned me. Diane has always been the quiet one, the one who holds everyone's secrets without ever asking for anything in return. I wish I'd told her more often how much I admired that. I hope one day she knows how much I needed her to be strong for all of us. I had to sit down. Was that it? No apology? No explanation? Just admiration? That wasn't enough. Not after a lifetime of being the second thought. But deep down, I knew that letter was the closest thing I'd ever get to a mother's reckoning. Joni came over the next day. She brought soup, like always. Chicken with too much rosemary, but it was still warm and it smelled like our childhood. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands fidgeting with the silver spoon. She said, "I need to ask you something." I quietly said, "Okay." She stared at me. "Did you tell Danny about the house?" I blinked. "What house?" "Mom's house, the inheritance. You told me I was going to sell it. He said you called him, that you said I was trying to erase the past." Ah, there it was. The real storm. I hadn't meant for it to blow up like that. I made a comment. A single line about how Joni always wanted to forget where she came from. I didn't know Danny would go ballistic. I said, "I didn't mean to start anything," too quickly. "You always do this," she snapped. "You play innocent, but you plant seeds. You make people doubt me." "I've never lied about you." "No, you just twist the truth enough to make yourself look like the victim." That stung, because deep down, she wasn't wrong. That night, I sat by the open window, wrapped in the same plaid blanket I've had since 1982. The cicadas were singing loud, the air was thick with honeysuckle, and my back ached the way it always did when rain was coming. I thought about what Joni said, about the seeds I'd planted. I thought about Danny and how I'd tried to make him mine when he was never meant to be. I thought about Mom's letter and how love can feel like an afterthought even when it's not. And I realized something I wasn't ready to admit before. I didn't just want Joni's life. I wanted to know what it felt like to be loved the way people loved her, loudly, publicly, without hesitation. I wanted to be the first call, not the afterthought. I wanted the kind of life where you don't have to wonder if you matter. Radio, some nights I wonder if I would have done it all differently. But then I think, maybe I wouldn't, because wanting something badly doesn't make you a villain. But taking it changes everything. And I had already taken too much.
The final time I saw Joni was a Tuesday. Funny how it's always Tuesdays with us. Tuesday was the day Mom used to make her meatloaf, overcooked, dry, but served with the kind of affection that stuck to your ribs more than the food ever could. It was also the day Joni used to take piano lessons in high school. I'd wait outside the church annex, staring through the dusty windows, watching her fingers dance across the keys like they were made of light. That Tuesday, the piano was silent. Joni came to me with red-rimmed eyes and a tremble in her voice. She wasn't angry anymore. She looked tired, like someone who'd been carrying a heavy box too long, only to discover it was full of nothing but dust. "Danny's not talking to me," she said, her arms crossed like she was hugging herself. "He says I lied to him, that I manipulated the family." I couldn't meet her eyes.
Did you tell him I cheated on his father? No, I whispered. I would never. But you let him think I'm a liar. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to say, you don't know how it felt to be invisible all those years. But instead I just said, I was hurt. Her face crumpled. You think I wasn't? You think getting everything meant I didn't have pain? Danny was the only thing I did right, and now I've lost him. Silence stretched between us like laundry lines sagging in summer heat. She left without finishing her tea. The truth didn't set me free. It just sat there, heavy and sour, like spoiled milk in the back of the fridge. I kept hoping if I ignored it long enough, it would disappear. But guilt doesn't work like that. Guilt grows. It fills the room. It wakes you up at 3 a.m. and reminds you who you were when no one was watching. I called Danny. I told him the truth, every word. How I'd planted the idea in his head, how I'd stirred the pot, needing to feel important. I waited for him to yell, to curse, to hang up, but he didn't. He just said, I thought I knew who you were. And then he ended the call. Weeks passed, then months. Joni didn't call, didn't write. Her silence was louder than anything she could have said. I sent her a letter, no apologies, just memories. I wrote, do you remember the summer we tried to build a lemonade stand but ended up drinking everything ourselves? I wrote, do you remember Mom's perfume, the one she only wore to church and weddings? I wrote, do you remember how we used to sleep in the same bed during storms, even when we were too old for it? No answer, but I like to believe she read it, maybe even kept it. The first frost came early that year. I stood by the window, wrapped in my old robe, watching the world turn silver. The wind rattled the window panes like they were old bones. Everything felt quiet. And in that quiet, I finally understood. I never hated Joni. I hated how I was with her. Small, jealous, needy. And maybe she hated how she felt around me. Guilty, watched, held to impossible standards of grace I had built in my head. We were mirrors that cracked each other. But mirrors can still hold reflections. Last week I saw her at the grocery store. She was by the apples. Red Delicious, her favorite, though she always said they weren't really all that delicious. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and chose not to. She looked older, softer. There were more lines around her eyes. She was wearing our mother's brooch. I hadn't seen it in decades. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel bitter. I felt still. Now I spend my days differently. I walk in the mornings, feed the birds, talk to the neighbors' grandkids who call me Miss D, even though I've told them 1,000 times I'm just Diane. Sometimes I sit by the piano. Joni's old one. She gave it to me when she moved. I never learned to play, but I keep it dusted. It still smells like cedar and old sheet music, like a memory that never left. And some nights I pour 2 cups of tea. One for me, one for the sister I still love, even if she never comes back. Because some love doesn't need fixing. It just needs remembering. And if you're still listening, thank you for hearing my story. Sometimes the only way out of the shadows is to speak from them